Today we're going outside to shoot with a really large aperture, which is going to give us that nice shallow depth of field, the blurry background, but that also lets in a ton of light. So how do you do that in the direct sunlight? We use this little piece of gear right here. Let's go. All right, so we're outside and I couldn't even put the camera in the same aperture. I was gonna carry it outside with the same aperture, but it's just too bright out. You wouldn't be seeing anything right now. So I'm actually at an aperture of f/16 and the trees behind me are in focus and I'm in focus. So everything's in focus. It has that typical small sensor video camera look to it. And that's not what we want with DSLR some of the time. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. So let me show you what it looks like if I had used the same aperture to get that shallow depth of field that you saw inside. Let me show you what happens. So let's go down to, we were at about an f4 or lower, and there you go. This is what happens if you're outside and you were trying to shoot with a shallow depth of field with nothing on your camera in front of it, like the Fader ND, which we're going to show you. So what do we do? What options do we have? Well, the first option, I guess, is to, as I showed you, we can raise the aperture number, okay? And you can see I have to go all the way up to f/16 or f/14 just to be well exposed. But we can drop our aperture a little bit. We could go down to, let's go down to f5.6. We dropped it a lot. And the next thing we could do is drop our ISO. Well, the ISO is already as low as it's going to get for this camera. And then if we go to the next step, we have shutter speed. Now this will change the look of your motion blur in your image, but we can crank up to 1/100th of a second, and you can see how that darkened the image, but we're still not where we want to be, right? We still have a little bit, the blurry background is there, but we're overexposed. So what do we have left? So we're outside, we're trying to shoot shallow depth of field, nice DSLR image type video, and it's too bright. We've changed our shutter speed and we've changed our aperture, but changing your aperture gives you that everything in focus look, and that's not what we want. So we have to go to something like this, a Fader ND, which is a really cool piece of gear. It has several levels of neutral density in there, and you might be able to see this. As I turn this, it gets darker and darker through the lens, through the filter. So neutral density allows us to put this on our camera, shoot at a high aperture, and change the exposure with the disc here. At many different levels you have, and that's why it's called a Fader ND. And that's how we're gonna get shallow depth of field with a really wide aperture. Let me throw this on the camera. All right, I've thrown this on the camera and we're gonna go back to our regular settings, which is 50th of a second on the shutter, and our aperture was down to like 4 or lower, and you can see we're still overexposed because I'm using the minimal level on the Fader ND. So let's actually adjust. All you gotta do is turn the disc and you can see it's gonna start getting darker. So now you can see the background is out of focus and I'm in focus, and we have that nice DSLR video look. So if you're shooting outside in the bright daylight and you wanna use those large apertures to get that shallow depth of field, a blurry background, the Fader ND is going to be the way to go. See you next time.